Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 95 of College Football Throwdown. I am your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, college football fans and Husker fans. And wow, number 95. We're getting close to the big 100.
That's right. And we're going to have to do something special for that one.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so for those of you who haven't been listening to us for 95 episodes, this is College Football Throwdown, a college football podcast by college football fans for college football fans. We are a father-son duo here to talk about all things we love about the sport, as well as our favorite team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And before we dive into our discussion of Nebraska's game against Penn State, we both have a beverage to crack.
Yes.
In my case, I have a Shock Top Belgian wine here, or Belgian white, rather. However,
Yes,
in my
Belgian white.
eagerness, I cracked it before the podcast, so right there, that's all you're gonna get from the cap. So there you go.
Gotcha. Well, and mine happens to be a bottle also, so I don't know that we're going to get the normal opening of the can of beverage like we normally do, but I will try to see what we can get from the clink of opening a bottle. But mine is my favorite beer from here in the state of Arizona, where I am currently residing. It's a wonderful Scottish style amber beer called Kilt Lifter. And I really like it. It's wonderful. And I found it at the store today, and I'm like, hey, I need to grab one of those. So here we go. Here's my first Kilt Lifter of the season. Oh, you heard that, right?
Yeah, that was nice.
That was a nice one. Nice, okay. Under a little pressure.
I see. Well, I didn't realize you found this beer today, so it's a recent discovery.
Oh no. I drank it quite regularly last year. And I guess I discovered it 2 years ago. When we were here 2 years ago, but I only get it when I'm here in Arizona.
All right. Well, this past weekend, Nebraska played its third game of the season against Penn State, and on the previous podcast, we gave our usual predictions. Both of us predicted a Penn State victory. However, you predicted a dominant victory of 42-24, whereas I predicted a closer game of 24-28 going Penn State's way. But in the end, it ended up being a Nebraska victory of 30-23. So a pleasant surprise for both of us, I would say.
Yes, absolutely. Particularly how we performed in that first half. Well, and thanks to some gifts from... It's always nice when, the opponent doesn't play well.
Yeah, that helps. But as you recall from the podcast, my score prediction was predicated on the fact that I figured that Penn State would make mistakes, turnovers and things based on their performance, because they have also had a bad season so far. And that definitely proved to be the case with a fumble that was brought back for a touchdown by our defense and a costly interception by their first team quarterback that led to him being replaced.
Yes. And thank God they took a whole half to replace him, because his backup was way better than he was.
Yeah. I kind of thought it was a weird inverse of the Northwestern game, because when you look at the stats, Penn State way outstatted us in everything, but those two turnovers were really costly. And then when they brought in the second team quarterback, they started doing better. It's kind of like how we were against Northwestern, except we didn't bring McCaffrey in until the third quarter. Whereas, maybe if we had brought him in earlier, we would have won that game.
Right. I'm sure, depending on how the remainder of our season progresses here, like, for example, let's suggest that we might win this weekend if we could and start moving in a positive direction, that we'll look back on that Northwestern game and be kicking ourselves.
Oh, yeah. Well, we definitely will be. And I was saying in a comment online that this was the best win of Scott Frost's era so far, and some guy commented saying, against a 0-4 Penn State team, like, way to go. And I was like, hey, man, we'll take what we can get, because the only other one that's worth the look back through our previous wins, the only other one that could compete is the Michigan State victory in 2018. which we won in
Correct.
like a 6-9 close game, very
Right.
defensive game. That's
Right.
the only other one I can think of that would really come
Well,
close.
and had last year gone more positively, I would say that people would still be looking back at that Michigan State win and say that was the turning point, right? Because that was the first significant win we had after we finally broke the snide and started winning football games in that first season. But then we fell back in season two, and so the significance, the relevance of that Michigan State win becomes more diminished. Now we look at this win against Penn State, and yes, they're 0-4, but they're 0-4 having played what we now know is two really good football teams in Indiana and Ohio State, right? And then the unexplainable one was, of course, the Maryland one. But even Maryland is showing themselves to be a way better football team than people perceived going into this season. So when you look at what Penn State, and they were obviously playing with the wrong quarterback. If they go with the new guy, I have a feeling there's a few W's in Penn State's future.
Oh yeah, yep. No, and he's once again the similarities continue because he's a little bit like McCaffrey too, in that I would say McCaffrey is a better runner than that guy, but that guy's a better passer than McCaffrey. Though both neither great passers, because there were a number of they kept bringing it up. The announcers were during the second half of the game were like, oh, if you lead that guy a little bit this way, you got to read how the defenders are defending, to get the ball the outside where your guy can get it, and he would throw it inside and thus it would be incomplete. But had he thrown it outside, his guy could have gotten it, right? So it's those sorts of details that guy still needs to work out. But once he does, he'll be a threat because he's got that dual quarterback thing with him.
Right. He's a very physical runner. Even though he's not super fast, he's big, strong. He's like 230 pounds. The guy's like a fullback.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, this game got off to a great start for us. It was 10-0 by the end of the first quarter, with a field goal that was a little bit frustrating because we were like right at the goal line, or
right. Should have been 14. Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
Right, and there were a couple moments like that where we had good drives and then had to settle for field goals, which was frustrating. At the same time, then when you go into halftime and it's 27-6, against Penn State, who we all thought we were going to lose to, you got to feel pretty good about that. McCaffrey showed why he's in as quarterback, and we gave the ball to Wan'Dale Robinson a lot. Probably too much over the course of the whole game, but still, I was happy to see him getting some touches. And we had a really nice run by Betts, which I believe that was the first time we had really seen him do anything significant this season.
Well, he has caught some passes in the previous game against Northwestern, and then of course had some receptions in this game as well. But yeah, he's a true freshman that's just getting into the groove a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's interesting when you look at the stats, like I mentioned earlier, they really are very Penn State favored. Like in terms of total offense, they put up 501 yards against us, whereas we were at 298. They had 30 first downs to our 17. And on third down conversions, we were, let's see, where are we? 4 of 12, while they were 8 of 17.
And they were really good on fourth down too. They were like 3 for 3 or 4 for 4 or 4 for 5 or until the end.
It was,
and then
right, 3 of 5.
3 of 5. But they were 3 for 3 in the first 3. And then at the end of the game, when they were trying to win, when they were trying to score to tie, they went for it on fourth down twice and didn't get it. Until the end of the game, they were pretty much, in the middle of the field when they needed 2 or 3 yards on a fourth down. They just line up and smash us and get it.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that stood out to me in terms of like us really struggling in some of those like third and short situations is I really felt Mills being absent. And my understanding is that he got hurt with some sort of leg injury. really hurt us,
Correct.
because Wandale is great, obviously, but he's a little guy, so he's not the guy you bring in on 3rd and 3, to just power it in down the middle, right? Like, he's never going to be that guy. Whereas Mills was able to do that pretty effectively against Northwestern last week. But my understanding is that he was like limping at halftime. Is that what you heard as well?
Yeah, well, it was even before halftime. Yeah, he got hurt, and they decided to hold him out, and that's when we started utilizing Robinson a little bit more frequently at the running back spot, because we just didn't. And I don't know what has happened to Johnson. Um, let's see, it's Ronald Tompkins and Ramir Johnson, who played a little bit last year, but has seen the field very little this year. So he clearly is. I don't know if they're just trying to see what they have in Tompkins after his recovery from all of his surgeries, and wanting to see what a guy like Scott the third,
Mm-hmm.
who's a true freshman.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, then unfortunately we kind of saw a repeat of what we've seen earlier in the season, and that in the second half the other team made adjustments and we kind of struggled to deal with it, and they started scoring more regularly on us. Although the defense was still slowing them down, but then the offense just couldn't get anything going. And when we did finally get a drive in the fourth quarter, we once again had to settle for a field goal. Weren't able to get in the red zone. And especially then when what I really felt like the game was falling apart was when the defense, which had been good at not letting up any big plays for most of the game,
Right.
goes for a blitz, doesn't get it, and leaves one of the receivers wide open for an easy touchdown scenario for them.
Right,
That
but
really
it ended
hurt.
up
And then followed
not
by us throwing an interception on the very next drive after like 3 plays. So
right.
giving them the ball with great field position so they can easily tie it up and win the
Yep.
game. Uh,
Yep.
and then they drive it down. We stop them on the goal line, so they get nothing out of it. Uh,
Then we
or
go 3 and out.
Right. And yeah, and then we get the ball, and if we just get like a couple first downs, we win just by running out the clock, but we can't do that. We go 3 and out and give them another chance. And then the defense does another goal line stand to save the
To
day, as it
secure the
were.
win.
So
Right.
that was my
Exactly.
big takeaway. Because I know you were very upset with our defensive coordinator as we were texting back and forth throughout the game, because they were, they were, Penn State was having these drives that were going down the field on us pretty consistently, but we seem to always find a way in the red zone when their offense was more constrained on the plays they could run. That's when our defense kind of stepped up, and you have to be impressed by that ability to be clutch, because in the past we have not been able to do that. So the fact that we saw it here is a good sign, I think.
I agree. That is one of the positive takeaways, is that we had to make some plays, and we actually did, which is something we have not done in the past. However, I would say that Penn State made that easier by choosing to throw the football as much as they did. I was scratching my head during both of those goal line stands, or I'll say red zone stands, that we had late in the fourth quarter there, because they had a timeout available. Penn State did,
Mm-hmm.
which to me as a coach, if I know I've got a timeout available, then I know that I still have the option to run the football once and then call a timeout after that run is complete, if it doesn't produce the desired result, right? And I don't lose a whole heck of a lot more time than I would if I threw the ball and it was incomplete, right? So as long as I can hold on to uh, one timeout, I have the flexibility in my play calling, in my opinion, to allow me to run the football as well as pass it. But for whatever reason, they went into a full pass mode and threw it basically like 8 or 9 times in that sequence of two red zone visits, when they had dominated us, really, in terms of being. I mean, they could have lined up and ran the football, and every 3 downs they would have gotten a first down. And certainly when they got into the fourth quarter and they were still behind and they were going for it every fourth down because they had no reason not to, they were easily getting it if they needed to go to fourth down. So, I would have been way more run heavy if I had been Penn State's offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. One other thing I noted is that I'd seen in their past games that their receiver Dotson is one of their best players, and he had like 2 receptions the entire game. We really did a good job of kind of shutting him out of the plays, which was good to see. Now, they had a different guy who got quite a few receptions, but that was still a promising sight in my mind.
I would agree. But I have a fundamental question to ask about what we do, for example, going forward this week, based on the results of the Penn State game, because I would like to think that our coaches have now witnessed in a game situation our defensive backs and our defense in total able to stop some teams when they were playing man up, right? We were playing man on man in some of those circumstances, and we were able to keep them from getting consistent receptions. And we had some really good one-on-one defensive plays. I mean, Cam Taylor had a phenomenal pass breakup that was spectacularly athletic, I thought, and a game saver. And then I think both the Williams and Dismuke also had at least one themselves where they had just a great punch out type of defensive play and no personal foul penalties, no pass interference, which was amazing. And even Penn State's coach mentioned afterwards that they were basically, that was the reason they were throwing it. They were counting on the fact that even if we played good defense, that one of those was going to get called a pass interference, because they always do.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't happen.
And that's good other point to make. We were relatively penalty free in this game, which was good to see. There was one particular hit that looked like it was targeting, and to me it was reviewed as such, and to me it frankly looked more like targeting than the 2 that got called on our players in the previous games. But then they actually picked up the flag on that one. They didn't call it
right,
targeting,
right,
which I get that it was a little bit different rules because he wasn't a defenseless player, he was a runner.
He was running, and our player did not launch. His feet were still on the ground, but he still had his head down, and I think there still was helmet to helmet contact, although it was very subtle. And after review, and looking at it real time, it looked like there was way more helmet to helmet contact. But in watching it in the slower motion of the video replay, you could see that the majority of the contact was on the shoulder. But you're right. When you break that down, and then you look at some of the other times this season or even in past years when we have gotten these targeting calls called against us, that one would have been in that same group, right? So I'm a little surprised that it didn't get called, and happy obviously, but the fact is that we're living on the edge when we keep doing this sort of stuff, and I think it's just something we're going to have to learn to live with.
Right. And one other little point I wanted to make, because you've made it as well during the game, was that we had several points where our players were confused, or we had late substitutions going on.
Right.
Which either forced us to call a timeout, because then Penn State had to be given the opportunity to substitute their players, or it was just coming too late and we had to call a timeout because of that, or whatever. And I'm not 100% clear on how those rules work, which maybe you could help me a little bit. Okay. So if we substitute a player with let's say 20 seconds left on the play clock, how long does Penn State then get from the ref to bring in their own player for substitution?
And here's where the complexity comes in. There isn't a definitive answer. There's not a 5-second rule or an 8-second rule or anything like that. There is a word of reasonable. And the ref then uses reasonable judgment. And the reason they have to do that is that it legitimately is harder to substitute a player if you're way down in the red zone. And so your players, if they're staying in the player's box, right, which is from I think the 35 to the 35, the players and the coaches can't go any further towards the goal line than the 30 or 35-yard line. There's a white box that's defined on the sidelines, right? And that's where the players are supposed to be. Well, then if you have to substitute in that situation, obviously it's going to take longer for a player to come from that box area all the way onto the field and get positioned versus if it's at the 50, right, in the middle of the box area. So that's why they don't have a definitive time, like 5 seconds in that rule. They say reasonable, and it's up to the referees to pass that judgment. And again, for whatever reason, Big Ten refs, in my opinion, tend to be more consistently different than the other refs that I watch, than the ACC refs, than the SEC refs that I've watched, the Big 12 refs that I've watched all season. The Big Ten refs are choosing to be much more deliberate about what they perceive as reasonable than what I see from other schools or other conferences. So that's the thing. So what happens is if you're an offensive team, Alex, and you make a late substitution, say you said 20 seconds, I would say, let's say more like 15, right? Or 18, something less than 20 seconds. If it's 20 seconds, you're probably still okay. But if you make a substitution with 18 seconds left, now the defense has to be given the opportunity to substitute. So now they can take their time as long as the ref doesn't think they're lollygagging, right? And all of a sudden their substitution, you have to let their substitute come on and their substitute get off so that the play does not snap with 12 men on the field, right? So by the time that's all done, now when you're able to line up and start going and the referee steps away from in front of the center, you're down to 8 seconds, 6 seconds, something like that, all right, before the snap of the ball. Well, in Scott's system, with all the checks and the looking over the defensive alignment and all that kind of stuff before that happens, if we're not set and if we're not ready to go before 8 seconds left in the play clock, then that's too late, right? By the time all the motions and stuff that you called are going to happen, you're going to run out of time. Mm-hmm. So that was what happened down there near the goal line, where we made a late substitution because we had the wrong personnel in, and then that guy had to run off and a new guy had to come on. And when that happened, that gave Penn State the opportunity. So we were sitting at like 8 seconds, and Penn State was still being given time to bring their guy on. Well, shit, by the time they got all set up and it was an important down, it was like a third down, Scott had no choice but to call a timeout. So even though it was the defense that was substituting last and it looked like they were lollygagging, the fact is that they could have just let it go to time expired, and then it would have been up to the ref to decide, was that Penn State's fault for being lollygaggers, or was that Nebraska's fault because they substituted too late? And they would have most likely called that on us, and we would have lost 5 yards, right? And in the red zone, that's huge. So what do you do if you're a coach? You call a timeout. That was a long-winded answer, but that's the way. Okay. That's why that's such a confusing thing.
Right. Yeah. That one play in particular, it definitely looked, just from looking at the cameras, like the Penn State's guys were, moving pretty slow, or like that, they were not, definitely not moving as fast as they could have.
Right. They were not in a hurry.
No, they weren't,
right.
And so to me, that kind of almost seemed like, they were like abusing the system in a way. But to your point, at the end of the day, it's on Scott and his assistants for waiting that late to substitute. Whoever's in charge of that has to be on top of that. And hopefully they got a talking to after this game.
Exactly. Well, absolutely. In fact, if whoever was responsible for getting personnel groupings on the field, that person probably needs to either I don't know if you can even coach them up at this point. We're in game 4. So whoever's doing that failed, flat and simple. Whatever assistant coach or GA or whatever who was responsible to make sure that the right wide receivers and running back combination was in the backfield there, um, that guy needs to lose his role on game day at a minimum. And somebody who is going to take that more seriously and get their shit together needs to take that job, because that is not just in the timeout situations, just in general. We were running plays where it was pretty clear after they were running the play, the wrong people were on the field. And it's why McCaffrey sometimes found himself with very few options of what he could do.
Yeah. Yeah. And my last point to make on the game will be obviously that I was, I was anxious, of course, in that fourth quarter when it looked like we were going to lose again, but I was very happy that we ended up winning. I felt like I was not pleased to see that McCaffrey did seem to struggle throwing the ball more in this game than he had even in his little bits in the Northwestern game. Part of that was due to the pass protection on him just being bad, because Penn State guys were frequently getting back there very quickly, so he didn't have much time to get his receivers. But I'm hopeful that in this next game against Illinois that we will be able to see him just doing, I'm not even expecting deep passes, but just the short, 8-12 yard passes, to get us first downs. I want to see him getting those more consistently.
Absolutely. Well, and I want more than that. I have an even higher bar than what you've just described in terms of what I think we need to be able to see, and we need to be able to demonstrate, because I think Illinois will certainly challenge us in that regard with their defensive game plan and basically say, I dare you. They're going to be basically putting us in a situation where if we can't prove our ability to throw and complete longer passes, then they're going to be so focused on those shorter routes and the running game that they're going to shut us down. Okay, and so and our offensive line is going to see that kind of aggressive, blitzing, adding people to the box kind of approach that Penn State used in the second half. That's going to happen again until we prove that they can't do it. Right? We're going to have to be successful against a team and have some explosive big plays as a result before teams will back off. And so, yeah, that's a big deal. That is a really big deal. And in fact, that kind of dovetails very nicely with what my final comment was going to be, Alex, about this game. Was I was so frustrated with our defensive alignment, and particularly in the second half, it seemed, and maybe it was happening in the first half. And although I've watched the game a couple of times now, and I felt like we were playing with our linebackers at what I would call traditional spacing off the line of scrimmage, so that they could flow to the play side, flow to the ball. But in the second half, we dialed up the pressure when things started getting a little tighter because of Penn State's success. And when we did that, there was no one left. There were no linebackers. The linebackers were all right up on the line of scrimmage, supposedly with the idea of threatening to blitz, creating some challenge for Penn State's offensive line and offense to figure out who was going to come and who wasn't. But in doing so, it basically put us in a situation where if they were able to crack that seam in their running game, then the chances were good that whoever was running that football, whether it was the quarterback or the running back, they were going to make, 10 to 20 yards, because there's no linebackers to flow to the ball. Additionally, when you put people up like that, all of a sudden, they run some kind of a combo blocking scheme, and all of a sudden one of our linebackers goes the wrong way, and it's a huge gap. And there were some massive holes that Penn State was able to create, and they didn't even have to create them. We created them for them by virtue of how we did our gap integrity along the line of scrimmage. Yeah. And I'm just, the only way they have to stop doing that. Nebraska has to stop doing that, and the way they can stop doing that is by integrating more man-to-man secondary coverage. If they go to more of a man coverage with a single safety, meaning cover one is what that's referred to as, where you have one safety that's kind of staying back there and just kind of governing anything that's going deep, right? And they're going to pick whichever person they're going to cover, and otherwise it's going to be up to the individual man-to-man assignments that they stay with their guy, right? But if you do that, then you can tend to have one additional guy that tends to be more focused on the box, on the running plays, on a scrambling quarterback, et cetera, et cetera. Follow me?
Yeah.
And we need to be able to do that. If we're not able to do that against an Illinois team that at this point does not have a large number of wide receivers who appear to be a big threat. They have one guy that's pretty darn good and has done some spectacular things for them already this season that we have to be concerned about. And so that guy's going to be a hard matchup for somebody. And we might have to shade our cover one safety to that guy. But we should be able to put that extra guy in the box so we can spy this athletic quarterback that they now have and do that. So the implication is not just about the Penn State game, but about all of our future games. We've got to be able to have confidence in our secondary, and our secondary is mature and should be able to do it. And I think we demonstrated it in the Penn State game with some of the great defensive secondary work we did, especially late in that game.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I noticed that as well, that we really need to leave at least, one guy behind the line to account for their quarterback just tucking and running it, because there are so many pass plays where he dropped back and then just, when the pocket opened up for him, he just ran straight down. There was nobody to stop him.
Right. And a couple of big explosive running plays they had in the second half, where once they got past the line of scrimmage, there's nobody left. And they end up getting tackled by, one of our corners or safeties who came off of their receiver to make the tackle.
Right. Since you mentioned Illinois already, that might be a good transition to talk about that being Nebraska's next game next week.
Yes.
Illinois is currently 1-3, having lost to Wisconsin, Purdue, and Minnesota, but gotten their first victory just this last weekend against Rutgers, 23-20. So having now come off of this Penn State victory and it being at home, which obviously isn't much of a advantage these days with nobody in the stands, but I do think it is a small advantage still. I definitely feel like, if we play and make adjustments based on that Penn State game and, we're able to get Luke more comfortable in the role of quarterback, because I assume he'll be starting again and everything like that. I'm feeling pretty good that we'll get our W and hopefully get the second half of our season that's easier than the first half that we had off to a good start.
Well, that would be the hope. And it seems that is the tenor of, the bulletin boards that I frequent and things like that. But I have great concern because, recent history tells me that Nebraska has really, really struggled and has in fact made a lot of very average running quarterbacks look like All-Americans. And in fact, if you'll recall, there was a quarterback from Illinois, A.J. Bush, who actually ironically was one time a Nebraska Cornhusker and had transferred away to another school, and then I think a JUCO or something, and then transferred to Illinois and ended up playing at Illinois and playing against us as a senior. And he ran for at the time a Illinois record for quarterbacks rushing against Nebraska, like 187 yards. And that particular record was broken this past week by the Illinois quarterback against Rutgers, who ran. So that Illinois quarterback ran for 192 yards on like 30 carries. Okay. So this is a kid who was very highly regarded. He's a 4-star athlete, quarterback out of, if I remember correctly, the St. Louis area, and was somebody we recruited. A lot of teams recruited him. Most schools recruited him for something other than quarterback, because I think he also demonstrated in that Rutgers game that he doesn't have a great throwing arm or accuracy, but he is a remarkable athlete and faster than heck and quick. And he scares the heck out of me because of our propensity to not be very secure in our tackling technique. And secondly, because I don't see that traditional 3 levels of defense that I want to see when we're defending the run, because you have to be able to have a line that neutralizes the offensive line, that allows then those linebackers to flow to the play and make the tackle. That's the way the defense is designed to work. But the way that our defensive coordinator is choosing to scheme things, he seems to put people up on the line of scrimmage, standing up, all of our linebackers. So there's no linebackers away from the line of scrimmage. And it just drives me crazy.
Right. Well, and and that may be a situation of, although you were making the point that you saw it more in the second half, which is odd because then by that point, Penn State had brought in Levis, who's more of a running quarterback.
Right.
But hopefully, we would hope that he watched that Rutgers game and knows that this quarterback isn't so great at passing it, but is great at running it, and so is able to make that adjustment accordingly. But we will see.
And that's what I want to see. If I see us going to more man-to-man, because we have, I believe, the defensive backs to do it. We have maturity back there. We have some guys that are pretty darn good, and I don't believe Illinois is filled with wide receivers that are necessarily guys that we need to think are so phenomenal that they're going to be really hard to cover, for our DBs. We ought to have confidence that our defensive backs can hold their own against them, right? And if we can do that, then we can add some extra attention to the running game, and that will help contain him. We do that, and all of a sudden their offense looks very inept.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be interesting because they may go back to Peters, because their starter is probably going to be available again off of COVID. And so the question is, do they go back to Peters or do they start the game with Isaiah Williams? I think they'll start with Isaiah Williams. I think based on the post-game comments from Illinois' coach, I am convinced that Isaiah Williams will be the starter and Peter has lost his job.
Right. Yeah, I would definitely like to see those adjustments on the defensive side. On the offensive side, I think the thing I'm going to be looking for beyond the passing, which we mentioned earlier, is just seeing some more play variety and us not running Wan'Dale Robinson up the middle so much.
Right.
It felt like, especially in that second half, Penn State was really sniffing out, like when Luke was keeping it for a QB draw, or what we were doing on the running side of things. Whereas I feel like with Wan'Dale, he's so speedy, right? If you can get him to the corner and he can, just make one guy miss, then that's where he really excels, and then he's out in the clear and using his speed.
Right.
So I'd like to see more of that. And hopefully seeing some of those other running backs maybe coming to fill that running in the middle part of our game more.
I would totally agree with you, and that some of that falls on the quarterback, on McCaffrey, because he needs to understand the situation that he's doing. Because a lot of those plays, he gave the ball, he had a choice. He could have kept the ball and then had a run pass option off of that, right? Where he could have moved after that mesh with the running back on the zone read, and then once he read the zone read, kept it, and then given himself a chance to throw the football to a fairly shallow receiver again, but at least somebody who was down the field a bit, right? But he didn't do that. He kept his read continually. So whatever Penn State was doing was playing into what our reads were. And so each time McCaffrey was doing his read and then giving the ball to the running back every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we can't let that happen.
Yep. And part of that is, he's a freshman quarterback, still learning the system. So, once again, we may not get some of those errors if, Adrian is in the game, someone with more experience with the playbook, but I just think overall, we can use this season as a building opportunity for McCaffrey, knowing that he is our future and that his overall, level in terms of his potential seems to be higher than Adrian's at this point, who's now a junior. And one other thing I wanted to mention, you just reminded me of it, is in that Penn State game, I saw it especially on those first couple drives where we scored and we're doing really well in that first half. Adrian was out there like doing these custom handshakes with Wan'Dale Robinson, and he's out there like slapping everybody's back on the sideline, and we really seem pumped up, and the players seem to be excited with McCaffrey. So, there might have been some concern that, there may be some divide in the locker room in terms of Adrian versus Luke and that sorts of things. But it seems like just from the eye test that the team is behind Luke if he is our starter.
Absolutely, and I think great credit needs to be given to Martinez for showing the leadership and maturity to be a teammate, a good teammate, and doing all the right things. We'll see if that sustains, but I think it will, because I think Adrian, at the end of the day, and that's what makes this so hard for Scott, is he knows that Adrian has all the intangibles that you want out of your team leader. Okay, it's just that for whatever reason, his decision clock, his decision making was simply not happening fast enough. And I'll be curious when the opportunity presents itself for Adrian to get in there again, and I think he will. I believe Adrian will play snaps at quarterback in this coming game against Illinois. I think you'll see a few plays where he and McCaffrey are in the game at the same time again, where Adrian is the quarterback and McCaffrey is the possible secondary quarterback kind of thing, just to create more things for the defense to worry about.
Right. Do you think that we have some sort of scheme in our system for McCaffrey being the quarterback and Luke being in there, or McCaffrey being the quarterback and Adrian being in as a running back / receiver? Because obviously he also has some good legs on him.
I know, but no. I think if we have both of them in the game at the same time, I think we will, because the thing that we've been practicing throughout the preseason and throughout the latter part of last year, all was the other way around. And so I think it would be in our best interest to continue to execute those plays that we have way more repetitions on. And it still presents the same challenge for the defense, right? They have two quarterbacks in the game that they got to be concerned about. One of them could take a handoff and run. Another one could take a handoff and then throw it, or the quarterback could just fake the handoff and throw it. So that would be an Adrian-based set of plays, not the other way around.
Right. Okay. So final thing to discuss here is our predictions against that game for Illinois. I'm going to go ahead and predict a Nebraska victory. What you said about Illinois' running game does have me a bit concerned, but I'm going to predict that Penn State game was the turning point that we want it to be, and that we're going to see some good things moving forward from this team. So I'll go ahead and predict that we win the game 31-21.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good score. That's a good prediction, Alex. I also want to, maybe it's our we're drinking the red Kool-Aid, you and I.
Yeah.
Because I'm also going to predict the Nebraska victory, but I want to say it with I want to tell you two things. One, that I believe the scenario is going to be that if Nebraska's defense can do what I want them to do, which is to play this more aggressive man-to-man style of secondary play and a single deep safety with greater regularity. You never go in one defense the whole game, so you're obviously going to have variety, but do that as our base package for, say, 60% of our snaps. Then I believe with that, we're able to contain that athletic quarterback and create frustration and ineptitude for them. And if we do that, I could see us winning this game by 21 points. Okay, I could see a Nebraska victory that's somewhere in the range of 42-21. Okay, or alternatively, we don't do that. This quarterback has an All-American day, probably runs for close to what he did last week, almost 200 yards, and they score a lot of points. And then we end up in a shootout that is right around, let's say, 42-38, and we win. So I'm going to say my two scenarios are both Husker victories. One of them is a nail biter that's going to cause me to have a heart attack and frustrates the hell out of me because our defense doesn't figure out how to stop an athlete at the quarterback position, or we play a team that either is so dumb that they put Peters back out there to start the game and play into our hands a little bit, or we are able to come up with a defensive game plan that actually shuts down this guy's athletic ability, and then he can't throw, and we win it that way. So I'm going to go with the nail biter because that's my paranoia. Until this team starts winning and demonstrating to me that they understand what the hell they're doing concepts-wise, I'm going to say this is going to be a nail biter. It's going to be 42-38 Nebraska, going down to who's got the ball last.
Okay. All right. We'll see which scenario plays out. Then talking about the other games from this past weekend, there weren't a ton of big games, but I've got a couple here to discuss. Number 9 ranked Miami played against Virginia Tech and won, but it was a very close game. They won 25-24.
That was I didn't watch much of that game. I just watched highlights, and I believe that Miami came from behind pretty substantially in that game.
That would make sense.
Miami is clearly the more talented team between those two teams at this point. And, I think Miami is on the come, which bothers me a great deal because I don't want them to have success. They're one of the teams I like the least in all of college football because of that stupid turnover chain and the arrogance and the flaunting, non-sportsmanlike nature of their tradition. So I don't want any success for Miami, but I have to give them credit that they have great athletes, and that quarterback they have is going to be a star in college football in the coming years. And so it doesn't surprise me.
There we go. Some hatreds run deep in college football, as they say.
Oh, God, yes.
And then in the Big Ten, there were two interesting games. Indiana shut out Michigan State 24-0, and then Wisconsin did end up playing Michigan and crushed them 49-11.
Yes. So first, what is your thoughts on the Michigan-Wisconsin game?
Well, I didn't end up watching the game. I'm guessing, I forget how, did they end up having several players still out with COVID, or were they mostly?
They did.
They did.
No, Wisconsin still had players out. In fact, I think it was like 4 or 5 starters did not play in that game, and they still kicked Michigan's ass.
If that's the case, then that is because I was expecting it would be closer. Wisconsin would still win, but it'd be closer if they still had significant players out. But if it was that bad with those players out, then that's pretty rough for Michigan fans.
Oh yes. Well, and the thing is that a little bit like our game with Ohio State last year, where we were down 21-0 midway through the first quarter. I believe Michigan was down 21-0, or maybe it was 17, but 3 scores, with 7 minutes left in the first quarter. They turned the ball over twice early, and Wisconsin turned them all into points. Wisconsin was super efficient and physically dominated them with their running game and with their defensive line. I mean, Michigan's quarterback was harassed and could not do anything. And he lost his composure, really. And Michigan actually started to look better again after they replaced him. And I think that guy, Michigan's quarterback, probably has lost his job to the underling, which is ironic and has a Nebraska tie-in in that Michigan's backup quarterback was supposed to be Luke McCaffrey's brother, Dylan McCaffrey, I believe his name is. It was the backup quarterback at Michigan until he was going to be the starter, and then when he lost that starting job, and then we canceled the season, Dylan put his name into the portal to transfer. So he's no longer with the team. He's still at the University of Michigan, I understand, as a student, but he's no longer with the team, and he is in the portal waiting to see if he can find another opportunity somewhere else. Now, I'm telling you, Dylan would have had a chance to play at some point here in these first 4 games for Michigan had he stayed with the team. he would have gotten his chance to show it off. But he left. So now Michigan is down to their third string quarterback effectively, who looks like he's going to be a better player than their starter.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a rough
Now,
situation for
so
sure.
then now we switch to the Michigan State game, and it still ties into Michigan. How in the hell did Michigan lose to Michigan State? Seriously. I mean, because Michigan State has looked pretty god awful in every game they've played except for the Michigan game.
Yeah. What was it? I think I saw something in the comments too about like all these teams that like lost to Northwestern and then like did really well like the next week. It's been like a consistent theme this season or something. So maybe it's that like, they because of course that's a big rivalry game, as we know, coming from the state of Michigan. So, they had some extra fire in them for that particular game.
Right.
Some extra focus was on that game. And then there's not much left in the tank for the rest of the season, I guess.
God, I mean, for Michigan, it's a head scratcher because they have so much talent. And I have a feeling, much like us, I think you're going to see Michigan, if they make the change at quarterback, I think you're going to see them right the ship a little bit here, and they're going to look better going forward. Because I think their problem, much like ours has been for the better part of, really a decade, has been we have not had good, what anyone would describe as good, consistent Division I, Power Five quarterback play. We've had a bunch of really good athletes who had the potential to be really great quarterbacks, but they didn't have the whole package. And once you get that in that situation in the Big Ten, the coaching in the Big Ten is so good across the board that if you're a team that does not have an effective quarterback, then the opposing defensive coordinators are going to figure that out, and they're going to make you look like shit because they're that good. Those coaches are that good. They're going to find your one or two weaknesses and exploit the hell out of them until you lose.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, to Northwestern's credit, Fitzgerald and his staff, they are phenomenal at figuring out what your weakness is and then just getting you to play in a phone booth, meaning you end up shrinking your offensive scheme down so small that they can contain you. And then they just muddy it up and make it ugly. And then at the end, they come out victorious because they play error-free and disciplined football, and they tackle really well. It's very in keeping with the Wisconsin structure and tradition now too, which is similar. And now those two teams play each other. So that's my transition into the big games for this week that don't include Nebraska is the Wisconsin Northwestern game.
Yeah, that should be an interesting one. The one I'm actually more interested in, that the other big one in the Big Ten is the Indiana-Ohio State game. Both teams, which haven't lost yet, and Indiana is probably the biggest surprise for me of this current college football season in terms of just how well they've performed. But of course, they haven't faced a team nearly as good as Ohio State up to this point.
Right.
So that'll be a real test for them. If they could somehow miraculously pull that off, that would be a real
it'd be huge.
Story.
That would be an earthquake in college football.
Yeah.
Well, and so the thing is, though, is Indiana's again one of these teams that's mature, collectively fairly mature team, and key spots, and then they have a young, athletic, and what appears to be quick twitch, quick thinking quarterback who is playing at a very high level. He's young; he's only a sophomore, but he's playing lights out. If that kid continues to do that, that's what can carry a mature team who's not making a lot of mistakes. Now, what's going to be interesting is Ohio State. Can they be like Wisconsin was? Wisconsin went 2 weeks without playing and then finally got to play again. So they haven't been playing for 3 weeks, Alex. Think about that.
Well, not just playing, but practicing, right? Like
they only they lost like 8 days or something in practice. Yeah. So they almost went 2 weeks without practicing even. And yet they came out and they looked like they were in mid-season form. Can Ohio State do that?
Hmm.
That's going to be the question, because now Ohio State has been off for 2 weeks. Can they be ready to go and be highly efficient? If they can, I think Indiana's story will end in a thud, and Indiana will find out what it's like to play a team who's at another level, right? And they won't look so good.
Hmm.
But if Ohio State, on the other hand, is reading their own press clippings, hearing about how great their Heisman front runner is at quarterback, and all of a sudden bad things happen because Indiana's efficient, um, then Ohio State could find themselves in a tussle, right? But based on my opinion of Coach Day there at Ohio State, I don't think that's going to happen, and I think Ohio State's going to be comparable in readiness to what Wisconsin looked like, and I think Ohio State's going to look really good. And when they do, then the differential is going to show up, and I think Indiana's for real, and they're gonna compete like we did. Remember, we were right in that game until just before halftime. I see Indiana being right in the game until sometime in the third quarter, and then the difference will happen, and it'll ultimately be a 14-point victory for or more for Ohio State.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Do you want to put I put that down as our game to predict for next week.
Uh,
Do you want to put a score on that particular game?
wow. Um, I don't think Ohio State's defense is nearly as locked down as it maybe has been. They don't have the superstar studs that they did previously, and I am doing this prediction without any knowledge of their COVID/injury situation. Um, but I'm going to, assuming that's not detrimental, I'm going to say that Ohio State's going to win, but it's going to be higher scoring because Indiana is going to put up some points. Indiana is going to score 28, which is a lot against an Ohio State defense. But I think Ohio State's going to score 35,
Okay.
35-28.
Okay. I think I'll actually go a little bit higher scoring than that. I'm gonna say it's gonna be a close game. Let's say that Indiana, uh, Indiana gets 38 and Ohio State gets 42. So they still win, but it's
Wow.
gonna be a close game.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that gets real nerve wracking. You get inside one score. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then you mentioned the Wisconsin Northwestern game, and maybe I'm biased here, but since we played against them, and frankly, I think we were the better team and should have won that game, and given how good Wisconsin seems to be playing, I don't think that one will be particularly close. I think if Wisconsin comes to play, they will comfortably win that football game.
I'm inclined to say that as well. I'm inclined to say that as well. I really don't. I think that Fitzgerald is doing a phenomenal job with that Northwestern team and is maximizing what they have, but they don't have that much, not compared to Wisconsin. And so the difference in the personnel is going to show, and Northwestern's going to try to play, like I say, kind of get it muddied down into a phone booth, but it's not going to work as well when you're playing against a team like Wisconsin, who, again, Wisconsin coaches on concepts. They coach on a basic philosophy of how they do things. And then the coaches can dress it up with a lot of motion and a lot of packages, like zip, their their zip series where they have their wide receiver motion that ends up being a running play, 6 times a game or whatever. Um, and that's the kind of stuff that they can do. And all the blocking and everything up front's the same, but there's all this shit going on in the background that confuses people, right? And I think that because they can do that, that's what allows them to always look so sharp. And I love that about Wisconsin, and I think that shows up this week.
All right, that's fair. And then the last big game is in the Big 12, which is Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State, another good rivalry game. Both these teams now have one loss, so them playing each
No,
other.
Oklahoma has two.
Oh, they do have two. Okay.
Yes.
Well then, so it's really do or die for Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State has the. I know they've lost their one game, which disappointed us because if they hadn't, they'd be the clear front runners in the conference.
Right.
But this is still a big opportunity for them.
Oh, it's a huge opportunity for Oklahoma State. But I think in keeping with the tradition of Oklahoma State, going back to the Big 8 days, Oklahoma State is going to steal the state of Michigan phrase. Oklahoma State is going to be little brother again, and Oklahoma is going to find a way to win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even though in the Michigan version of that contest, the little brother did win this time.
I know, but I'm just telling you that tradition and history says the opposite, and I'm looking at Oklahoma as the traditional power who struggled early because their athletes were still getting it figured out, but Oklahoma is starting to find their rhythm, and I just have a sneaky suspicion that this is the game where that's going to really begin to show up on a national stage. Oklahoma is going to win this game, and it may be comfortable for Oklahoma, just because I mean I've watched Oklahoma State for my whole life, right? And they've had some phenomenal athletes, some phenomenal teams, but they always find a way to lose to the big boys, and they just can't quite get over that hump. And I'm going to predict that will happen again.
All right. I'll go a little bit differently. I'm going to predict it's going to be close, maybe even only by 3 points or 4 points. But I think Oklahoma State is going to win and show the little brother or the big brother who's boss in this case.
Well, you know what? I hope you're right. I hope you're right, and I'm wrong. But I just have a feeling that Oklahoma is gonna get their shit together because this is the Bedlam War, and Oklahoma's team always rises to this occasion, and it's just so hard for Oklahoma State to overcome that. But I would love it if it happened. Love it, because that would then definitely put Oklahoma State in the driver's seat.
Yep. Yes, it would. All right. So thank you all out there for listening to this podcast. We'll be back next week for episode 96 of College Football Throwdown. In fact, we'll be recording that one in person because I will be visiting my father and mother for Thanksgiving week coming up here.
That's right.
So yeah,
we're very much looking forward to that.
Yes, so that'll be fun, and hopefully we'll be celebrating a victory over Illinois and the start of the turnaround for Scott Frost's Nebraska football team,
and preparing for the big Iowa post-Thanksgiving game. So
yes, that'll be a big one for sure. So if you all out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also find us online if you search for College Football Throwdown on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. You can leave us a review there. Let us know what you think of the podcast and what we can improve on. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you for co-hosting with me, Dad. And until next week, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.